Do you know what the sound of freedom is? To me, it is the dry click of a titanium latch snapping from a chemical reaction I spent 6 months brewing from trash. For 40 years I designed impenetrable safe rooms, never imagining my masterpiece would become my tomb for 2 years. My jailer was my only son, Lucas. He thinks I am rotting in the dark, but he forgot one thing. I built this cage and I know exactly how to destroy it, along with his fake life. My name is Michael Jones. The first thing that hit me was the smell. It was the scent of damp pine needles and wet earth, sharp and overwhelming after 730 days of recycled air. The wind howled through the Oregon treetops, carrying a bite of frost that should have made me shiver, but I did not feel the cold. I felt only the burning heat of a rage that had kept me alive when everything else failed. I stood at the edge of the forest looking back at the sprawling silhouette of the villa against the night sky. It looked peaceful from here. It looked like a sanctuary. But I knew better. Buried deep beneath that architectural masterpiece was a concrete box, a testament to my engineering genius and my catastrophic failure as a father. My lungs burned as I inhaled the freezing air, a violent reminder that I was still alive despite my son's best efforts. To understand why a 64-year-old man would be standing in the woods in the middle of a storm, looking like a specter risen from the grave, you have to go back to the beginning. You have to go back to the day I died. Or at least the day the world thought I died. It was exactly 2 years ago, my 62nd birthday. I remember driving up the winding access road to the villa in my vintage sedan. The tires crunched satisfyingly over the gravel. I felt a swell of pride as the house came into view. It was a modern fortress of glass and timber that I had helped pay for, nestled in the isolation of the Cascade foothills. Lucas had called me a week prior, his voice brimming with that charismatic charm that made him such a successful fund manager. He told me he wanted to celebrate my birthday, just the two of us. He said we needed to talk about my retirement, about the future. I thought he meant he wanted to ensure I was comfortable. I had no idea he was planning to make my retirement permanent. When I arrived, Lucas met me at the door. He looked impeccable in a cashmere sweater and dark slacks, the very image of the successful son every father dreams of. He hugged me, and for a second I felt the strength in his grip. I mistook it for affection. "Happy birthday, Dad," he said, ushering me inside. "I have a surprise for you. The renovations are finally done. I want you to inspect the basement. I want your professional approval." He knew exactly which buttons to push. I was a structural engineer for 40 years. I did not just build houses. I built fortresses. I designed panic rooms for tech moguls in Silicon Valley and bunkers for paranoid oil tycoons in Texas. Safety was my religion, and concrete was my scripture. Lucas led me down the floating staircase past the wine cellar to a heavy steel door that looked like it belonged on a bank vault. "The panic room," Lucas said, gesturing with a flourish. "Built exactly to your specifications from 5 years ago." I walked in my critical eye, scanning every inch. It was a masterpiece of security. I ran my hand along the walls. They were reinforced concrete 20 inches thick, laced with a rebar grid tight enough to stop a drill bit. I had specified a high-density aggregate mix that could withstand seismic shifts and blast waves. I checked the ventilation ports near the ceiling. It was an independent system with military-grade HEPA filtration designed to scrub out biological agents or smoke. "Biometric locks?" I asked, turning to the control panel. "Retina scan and voice recognition," Lucas confirmed. "Plus a manual override from the outside, just in case of system failure." "Good," I nodded, feeling a swell of paternal pride. "You listen to me. This room is impenetrable. If the world ends, you could survive down here for a year. Or someone could be kept down here," Lucas said softly. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. "Well, that is the duality of security, isn't it? A fortress to keep people out is just a prison if you lock someone in. But the engineering is sound." We went back upstairs to his study to have a drink. The study was a room of mahogany and leather smelling of expensive polish. On his desk, a stack of papers sat slightly askew. I have always been cursed with a detail-oriented mind. It is an occupational hazard. If a beam is off by a fraction of an inch, the building falls. If a number does not balance, something is wrong. As Lucas went to the bar cart to pour us a drink, my eyes drifted to the papers. The letterhead read, Vanguard Horizon. That was his hedge fund. I saw a project summary for a development in Seattle. The numbers caught my eye immediately. $12 million allocated for foundation work on a site that I knew for a fact was still in the zoning phase. I frowned. I looked closer. There were transfers to shell companies with names I did not recognize, routed through banks in Cyprus and the Caymans. Lucas, I said, my voice steady but cold. What is this? He turned around holding 2 glasses of amber liquid. He did not flinch. Just work, Dad. Don't worry about it. I am looking at a transfer of $12 million for a project that does not exist, I said, tapping the paper. And this invoice. This is for steel procurement from a company that went bankrupt 3 years ago. I know because I consulted for them. Lucas sighed, setting the glasses down on the coffee table. The warmth drained from his face, replaced by a flat, annoyed expression. You always do this. You always have to inspect everything. This is embezzlement, I said, the horror rising in my throat. This is money laundering, Lucas. If the SEC sees this, you are going away for 20 years. The SEC won't see it, he said calmly. Unless someone shows them. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. I saw the expensive watch on his wrist, the Italian shoes, the villa we were standing in. It was all built on lies. It was all stolen. My heart hammered against my ribs, not with fear, but with a profound, crushing disappointment. I had raised him to be honest. I had taught him that integrity was the only structural foundation that mattered. I cannot let you do this, I said. My voice shook, but my resolve was as hard as the steel I worked with. You are going to turn yourself in. We will get a lawyer. We will try to mitigate the damage. But you have to stop this now before you destroy your life completely. And if I don't, he asked, picking up the glasses again. Then I will call the FBI myself, I said. I love you, Lucas. I love you enough to stop you from becoming a monster. I will not let you steal from people. Lucas stared at me for a long moment. Then a smile ghosted across his lips. It was a sad, almost pitying smile. You always were rigid, Dad. Black and white. Right and wrong. No room for the gray areas where the real money is made. He walked over and extended a glass to me. Okay, you win. We will go to the authorities in the morning. I am tired of fighting anyway. But let's at least have a toast to your birthday, to 62 years of unblemished morality. I hesitated. I wanted to believe him. He was my son. I took the glass. To doing the right thing, I said. I took a sip. It was a 30-year-old single malt, smooth and smoky. But there was something else underneath the peat and oak. A metallic tang, faint but distinct. I swallowed, and almost immediately, a warm numbness began to spread from my stomach to my fingertips. It is good scotch, isn't it? Lucas asked, watching me with the intensity of a scientist observing a lab rat. Lucas, I mumbled. My tongue felt heavy, like it was 2 sizes too big for my mouth. What did you do? Just a muscle relaxant, he said casually, taking a sip of his own undrugged drink. Mixed with a sedative. High dose. Works fast on the elderly. I tried to step forward to grab him, to shake some sense into him, but my legs were gone. I felt my knees buckle, hitting the Persian rug with a dull thud. I tried to lift my arms, but they hung at my sides like lead weights. It was a terrifying sensation. My mind was screaming, firing panic signals, but the connection to my body had been severed. This was paralysis. I knew the symptoms. Peripheral neuropathy setting in within seconds. Motor cortex inhibition. I slumped sideways. my cheek pressed against the rough wool of the rug. My vision began to tunnel, the edges turning gray. The last thing I saw was Lucas, standing over me, looking down, not with anger, but with inconvenience. He looked at me like I was a load-bearing wall that needed to be removed to open up the floor plan. "I really didn't want to do this," he said, his voice sounding like it was coming from underwater. "But you left me no choice. You never could just leave well enough alone." Then the darkness took me. When I woke up, there was no light. Not a single photon. It was a darkness so absolute it felt heavy, pressing against my eyeballs. My head throbbed with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat, a dull, sickening pounding that made me nauseous. My mouth tasted like copper and bile. I tried to sit up and groaned. My muscles were stiff, screaming in protest. I reached out my hand, trembling in the void. My fingers brushed against cold, smooth concrete. I knew that texture. I knew the temperature. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the dizziness, and stumbled forward until my hands hit a wall. I felt along the surface. Painted concrete. I moved right. More concrete. I moved left until I hit a corner. I followed the wall until I felt the cold, unyielding surface of a steel door. No handle on the inside. Just a smooth plate. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog of the drugs. I pounded on the door. "Lucas, Lucas, open this door." My voice echoed flatly, absorbed instantly by the acoustic dampening panels I had insisted on installing to prevent sound from leaking out. I had designed this room to be a void. I had designed it so that no one outside could hear a scream from the inside. Suddenly, a crackle of static broke the silence, followed by a soft hum as the recessed LED strips in the ceiling flickered to life. The light was blinding. I shielded my eyes, squinting as the room came into focus. It was the panic room. My panic room. There was a bed in the corner, a small kitchenette, a toilet partitioned off by a privacy screen. It was furnished like a high-end prison cell. "Good morning, Dad." Lucas's voice came from the intercom speaker, mounted high in the corner. It was crisp, clear, devoid of static. Another specification of mine. I looked up at the camera lens, a black, unblinking eye, staring down at me. "Lucas, let me out of here. This isn't funny. Open the door." "I can't do that," he said. He sounded reasonable, calm, as if explaining to a child why they could not have candy before dinner. "You are not well. You had a stroke, Dad. A massive one." "I did not have a stroke," I roared, slamming my fist against the steel door. "You drugged me." "The doctors say the confusion is normal," he continued, ignoring my outburst. "The world thinks you are in a specialized care facility in Zurich, Switzerland. Very expensive, very private. I told everyone that your condition requires absolute isolation to prevent overstimulation. No visitors, no phone calls, just rest." I froze. The lie was perfect. It explained my disappearance. It explained why I wouldn't be at the club, why I wouldn't answer emails. Switzerland, the other side of the world. "You are stealing my life," I whispered, staring at the speaker. "You are burying me alive." "I am saving you," he corrected. "And I am saving myself. You were going to ruin everything, Dad. You were going to destroy the company, my reputation, everything I built. I couldn't let you do that. So this is the compromise. You get to live. You have food, water, ventilation. You are safe. You are in the safest room in America, designed by the great Michael Jones himself." "Lucas, please," my voice cracked. The anger was momentarily replaced by a desperate, pleading terror. "I am your father." "I know," he said. And for a brief second his voice wavered. But then the steel returned. "That is the only reason you are still breathing. Goodbye, Dad. Get some rest." The intercom clicked off. I stood there in the silence, staring at the door. The door I had specified to withstand a direct hit from a grenade launcher. The lock I had chosen because it was pick-proof. The walls I had poured to last for 100 years. I slid down the wall until I hit the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. The betrayal hit me harder than the drug had. My son. The boy I had taught to ride a bike. The boy I had sat up with when he had a fever. He hadn't just locked me in a room. He had erased me. He had looked at me, calculated the risk I posed to his bank account, and decided I was a liability to be archived in the basement. I looked at my hands. They were shaking. Not from fear, not anymore. They were shaking from the realization of what I was up against. I was trapped in a box of my own making, fighting a villain I had raised in a war no one else knew was happening. That was day one, the first of 730 days. And as I sat there on the cold concrete floor, listening to the hum of the air filtration system I had so carefully engineered, I realized something else. I had designed this room to keep threats out, but I had never tested it to see if it could keep a determined man in. Lucas thought he had buried a retiree. He was about to find out he had trapped an engineer. The dimensions of my universe had shrunk to exactly 40 square meters. For the first few days I paced. I did not walk, I marched. I moved from the kitchenette to the bathroom partition, from the bed to the heavy steel door, measuring the space with the rhythmic slap of my bare feet against the polished concrete. 7 steps one way, 6 steps the other. I counted the tiles. I counted the rivets in the ceiling panels. I counted the beats of my own heart, which seemed to hammer against my ribs like a trapped bird, desperate to break its cage. The room was a marvel of comfort, which made it all the more insulting. Lucas had stocked the kitchenette with organic canned soups, boxes of crackers, and bottled water. The bed was a high-end memory foam mattress. The bathroom fixtures were brushed nickel. It was a 5-star hotel room without a window, a tomb furnished by a decorator. But no matter how soft the sheets were, or how filtered the water was, the reality was in the walls. Reinforced concrete does not breathe. It does not yield. It simply exists, cold and indifferent to the human life decaying inside it. I spent the first 48 hours attacking the door. It was an act of pure animalistic denial. I knew better. I was the engineer who had approved the specifications for that very slab of steel. I knew that the core was a honeycomb titanium alloy designed to disperse kinetic energy. I knew the hinges were internal, welded to the rebar frame, deep within the concrete. Yet I threw my shoulder against it until my skin turned black and blue. I kicked it until my toes swelled. I screamed until my throat was raw, begging, threatening, bargaining with a son who could not hear me, or worse, who chose not to listen. On the third day, the engineer in me finally woke up and took over. I sat on the floor, panting, sweating, and staring at the locking mechanism. I began to run the numbers in my head. The door was secured by 3 1-inch solid steel throw bolts. To shear those bolts through brute force, I would need to apply approximately 50,000 pounds per square inch of pressure. That is roughly the impact of a loaded cement truck hitting a wall at 60 miles per hour. I looked at my hands, bruised and shaking. I could generate maybe 100 pounds of force on a good day. The math was absolute. The math was cruel. Physics does not care about a father's desperation. There was no way out through force. The realization hit me harder than the physical exhaustion. I was not just trapped, I was negated. Time became my first enemy. The lighting in the room was controlled by an automated system. At 6 in the morning, the recessed LEDs would glow a soft amber, brightening to a harsh white by noon, and fading to darkness by 10 at night. It was a synthetic sun, a mockery of the natural world. But my body knew the difference. Without the cues of true dawn and dusk, my circadian rhythm began to fracture. I would wake up convinced it was morning, only to find the room plunged in the artificial night. I would feel exhausted when the lights were at their brightest. To keep my sanity, to keep a tether to the reality existing above my head, I found a clock. It was not a watch or a digital display. It was a vibration. The panic room was situated directly beneath the pool equipment room of the main villa. The villa had an infinity pool with a high-capacity filtration system. Every day, I would press my ear against the ceiling pipes. I learned the schedule. The main pump kicked on at 8 in the morning with a deep, rhythmic thrumming that resonated through the steel beams. It ran for exactly 8 hours, shutting off at 4 in the afternoon. That low-frequency hum became my Greenwich Mean Time. I structured my existence around it. Pump on meant morning. Pump off meant late afternoon. The silence meant night. Then came the visits. The door had a small viewing port, a 6-inch square of ballistic glass, rated to stop a .50 caliber bullet. It also had a pass-through slot at the bottom, similar to what you see in solitary confinement cells, allowing for the transfer of items without opening the main door. Lucas came down on the 7th day. I was sitting on the edge of the bed staring at the wall when the electronic shade over the viewing port buzzed and slid open. Lucas's face appeared. He looked healthy, well-rested, his skin glowing with the tan of a man who spends his afternoons on the golf course. "Hello, Dad," he said. His voice came through the intercom, smooth and filtered. I leaped up, rushing to the glass. "Lucas, open this door. Open it right now. Do you have any idea what you are doing? This is kidnapping. This is a felony." Lucas did not flinch. He just looked at me with a mixture of sadness and patience that made my blood run cold. "Dad, please, calm down. You are having an episode." "An episode?" I slammed my palm against the glass. "I am not having an episode. I am having a realization that my son is a criminal." "See." Lucas turned his head slightly, as if speaking to an invisible doctor beside him. "The paranoia is setting in again. Dad, listen to me. You have been sick. You had a stroke. A cerebral event that affects your memory and emotional regulation. We talked about this." "We did not talk about this. You drugged me." "No one drugged you, Dad. You collapsed at the party. You started screaming about embezzlement, about fake invoices. It was horrifying. You were hallucinating. The doctor said it is a form of vascular dementia brought on by the stroke. You invent conspiracies to explain your confusion." I stared at him. The conviction in his voice was terrifying. He was not just lying to me. He was rewriting reality. "I saw the papers, Lucas," I said, forcing my voice to be steady. "The Vanguard Horizon accounts, the steel procurement. I saw them." "You saw a menu, Dad," Lucas said gently. "We were looking at catering menus for the party. You grabbed a menu and started reading numbers that weren't there. You were shouting about millions of dollars while holding a list of appetizers." I stepped back. A cold seed of doubt planted itself in my gut. Was it possible? I looked at my hands. They were trembling. Was that fear? Or was it a tremor I tried to replay the memory of that night? The papers on the desk, the font, the letterhead. It had seemed so real. But now, in the sterile silence of this concrete box, the memory felt slippery. What if I was wrong? What if my mind was failing? The isolation was already making me hear things. Sometimes I thought I heard footsteps when the pump was off. Sometimes I thought I smelled rain when the air was recycled. If I could imagine, could I imagine a crime? "I am taking care of you," Lucas continued. "I brought you your favorite books. I am handling the bills. I am handling the company. You just need to rest. Let the medication work." He slid a tray through the slot. It contained a hot meal and a small paper cup with 2 blue pills. "Take them, Dad. They will help with the agitation." I did not take the pills. I flushed them down the toilet the moment the port shade closed. But the damage was done. For the next week, I sat in the corner holding my head, trying to trace the lines of my own sanity. I recited the periodic table. I calculated load-bearing formulas for suspension bridges. I tried to anchor myself in facts, but Lucas's narrative was a parasite, eating away at my confidence. The second visit, 14 days in, was worse. Lucas held up a newspaper to the glass. "Look, Dad, the markets are up. And here." He pointed to a small column in the obituary section, or rather the public notices. "A nice notice about your retirement due to health reasons. People are sending their well wishes. They understand." "Let me speak to them," I croaked. My voice was rusty from disuse. "Let me call Robert." Robert was my attorney and my oldest friend. "Robert agrees this is for the best," Lucas said. "He helped me set up the conservatorship. He knows you are not capable of making decisions right now." "Robert would never agree to this." "He did when I showed him the MRI scans of your brain," Lucas said. "Or the scans he thinks are yours." He smiled, then a quick, sharp flash of teeth that vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Just kidding, Dad. Robert loves you. He just wants you safe." That smile. That split-second loss of control. It was the crack in the facade I needed. A man grieving for his sick father does not smirk. A sociopath enjoying his game does. The doubt began to recede, replaced by a slow, burning suspicion. I needed proof. I needed to know if I was crazy or if I was being played. The breakthrough happened on day 28. Lucas arrived looking hurried. He was wearing a tuxedo. He was going to a gala. He looked impatient. "I don't have much time, Dad," he said. "I just needed to show you this. The transfer of the deed for the summer house. We had to move it into a trust to protect it from potential liability suits regarding your previous engineering work. With your condition, clients are getting nervous. They might sue." He held the document up to the glass. "I signed on your behalf as your power of attorney." I moved closer, squinting. The text was small, but the signature block was clear. Michael A. Jones. It looked like my signature. It had the sharp slant to the right, the heavy cross on the T. But then I saw it, the J. When I sign my name, I always loop the bottom of the J with a closed, tight oval. It is a habit from drafting school away to ensure the letter does not bleed into the line below. The signature on the paper Lucas held had an open loop, a wide, lazy curve. It was a forgery. A good one, but a forgery nonetheless. And the date next to it was 3 days ago. If I had dementia, if I was legally incapacitated, Lucas would not need to forge my signature. He would sign as my conservator. He would sign his own name with POA next to it. The fact that he was faking my signature meant he did not have legal power of attorney. It meant Robert did not know. It meant the world did not know I was incapacitated. They thought I was still running things, still signing checks, still making decisions from a retreat in Switzerland. He was not protecting my assets. He was stealing them one by one, using my ghost to do it. I looked up from the paper to my son's face. He was checking his watch, annoyed that this prison visit was cutting into his cocktail hour. "Okay, Dad. I have to go. Be good." The shade slid shut. I stood there, and for the first time in a month my hands stopped shaking. The fog in my head cleared, instantly burned away by the heat of absolute clarity. I was not crazy. I did not have a stroke. I was the victim of a calculated, methodical dismantling of my existence. He had taken my freedom. He had taken my reputation. He was currently taking my fortune. But he had made a fatal error. He had shown me the blueprints of his deception. I walked over to the bed and sat down. I did not cry. I did not scream. I looked at the concrete walls, and they no longer looked like a prison. They looked like a problem, a structural problem. And I was the best structural engineer in the country. The panic was gone. The fear was gone. As I listened to the pool pump vibrate in the ceiling, marking the passage of time, I felt something new growing in the dark. It was cold. It was heavy. It was patient. It was hatred. And unlike concrete, hatred can expand until it cracks the world apart. Silence is a variable. To the untrained ear, silence is simply the absence of noise. But to an engineer, silence is a spectrum. There is the silence of a stopped machine, which indicates failure. There is the silence of a vacuum, which indicates emptiness. And then, there is the silence of potential energy, the quiet tension of a steel beam bearing a load just before it snaps or holds. I stopped screaming on day 31. I stopped begging. I stopped bargaining. I simply ceased to emit sound. To Lucas watching through the camera, it must have looked like resignation. He probably thought his father had finally broken, that the isolation had dissolved my will, just as the acid in a battery dissolves the casing. He was wrong. I was not resigning. I was recalibrating. My universe was 40 square meters of hostile architecture, but it was still architecture. And anything built by human hands can be unbuilt by them, provided one understands the load paths. I sat in the center of the room cross-legged on the cold floor, and I engaged the part of my brain that had made me wealthy. I stopped looking at the room as a prison and started looking at it as a schematic. I closed my eyes and visualized the original AutoCAD files for this basement renovation. I summoned the blue lines and white text from the depths of my memory, floating them in the darkness behind my eyelids. I traced the electrical conduits. They were buried 6 inches deep in the concrete walls, inaccessible without a jackhammer. I traced the plumbing. The pipes were copper, encased in PVC running through the slab foundation. Again, unreachable. Then, I moved my mind upward to the ceiling. The ceiling was a drop system, suspended below the structural concrete slab of the main house, to allow space for the HVAC ducts and wiring. The panels were acoustic tiles, lightweight and useless for escape, but they hid the machinery above. In the corner, directly over the bed, was the return air vent. I opened my eyes and looked at it. It was a standard industrial grill, 20 inches by 20 inches, painted white to match the tiles. It was screwed into a galvanized steel frame. I stared at that vent for 3 days. I remembered the day of the installation. It was 5 years ago. I had been upstairs arguing with the general contractor about the grade of lumber for the deck. I had come down to the basement to check on the progress. A subcontractor, a young kid who looked like he would rather be anywhere else, was installing that vent. I remembered watching him drop a screw. I remembered him cursing, reaching into his tool belt and pulling out a handful of mismatched hardware. He had lost the specified stainless steel machine screws. Instead, he had used standard zinc-plated wood screws. I remembered frowning. I remembered opening my mouth to reprimand him, to tell him that zinc would corrode over time in a humid basement environment, that the thread pitch was wrong for the steel frame. But then my phone had rung. It was a client in Dubai. I had taken the call, walked away, and forgotten about the screws. It was a minor detail, a cosmetic imperfection in a $1 million project. I had let it slide. Now, staring up at that vent, I realized that my past negligence was my present salvation. Stainless steel machine screws are hardened. They are difficult to strip and impossible to cut without power tools. But zinc-plated wood screws, they are soft, they are malleable, and if forced into a metal frame they were not designed for, the heads would be under immense stress. They were weak. I needed a tool. I looked around my cell. I had no knives, no forks, no sharp edges. Lucas had ensured that everything was rounded and safe, primarily to prevent suicide, but effectively preventing escape. I had a plastic toothbrush, a plastic comb, and flimsy paper plates. But I had a spoon. It came with every meal, a cheap stamped metal spoon. Lucas must have bought them in bulk from a restaurant supply store. They were thin, likely an aluminum alloy, but they were metal. I kept the spoon from my dinner that night. When I slid the tray back through the slot, I arranged the empty bowls to look like the spoon was buried underneath a napkin. The camera did not catch the sleight of hand. That night, when the lights dimmed to their lowest setting, I began the work. I sat in the farthest corner of the bathroom partition, out of the direct line of sight of the camera lens. I took the spoon and pressed the edge of the handle against the concrete floor. The floor was polished, but the aggregate, the small stones mixed into the cement, was quartz. Quartz is harder than aluminum. I began to rub, scrape, scrape, scrape. The sound was terrible. It was a high-pitched hiss that seemed to echo like a gunshot in the silence. I froze, looking up at the camera. The red light remained steady. No alarm. No voice from the intercom. The microphone software likely filtered out ambient white noise. Or perhaps Lucas was simply not listening at 3 a.m. I continued. I worked with the rhythm of a metronome. I rubbed the curved handle of the spoon against the floor, wearing down the metal atom by atom. My goal was to flatten the tip to square off the curve until it resembled the flat head of a screwdriver. It was agonizingly slow. After 4 hours of continuous grinding, my fingers were cramping so badly they looked like claws. I checked my progress. I had barely scratched the surface. The spoon looked slightly duller, that was all. I did not despair. An engineer knows that erosion is the most powerful force on Earth. Water cuts through canyons given enough time. I had nothing but time. I developed a routine. I would grind for 6 hours every night. I wrapped a piece of toilet paper around the spoon handle to blister-proof my grip, though my calluses soon grew thick enough to render it unnecessary. During the day, I had to hide the evidence. The spoon was easy enough to conceal. I found a loose tile behind the toilet, where the grouting had cracked another contractor error, and slipped the metal shank behind it. But the metal dust was a problem. A fine, glittering gray powder accumulated on the floor where I worked. If Lucas saw it, he would know. Every morning before the lights came up, I used a damp piece of toilet paper to wipe up the metal dust. I flushed it away, watching the evidence of my industry swirl down into the darkness. While my nights were consumed by friction, my days were consumed by kinetics. I was 62 years old when I entered the room. I was now approaching 63. My body was soft, accustomed to office chairs and luxury sedans. I knew that opening the vent was only the first step. If I managed to get into the ceiling, I would have to crawl through narrow ducts, support my own body weight, and potentially fight. I needed to be strong. I created a calisthenics program based on the prisoners' workouts I had read about in architectural briefs for correctional facilities. I did push-ups until my arms shook and collapsed. I did squats until my quadriceps burned like fire. I did lunges across the 40 square meters, back and forth hundreds of times a day. When the camera was watching, I moved slowly, shuffling like an old man. I did my exercises in the blind spot of the bathroom, or under the cover of the bedsheets, tensing my muscles isometrically until I was sweating and trembling. To the observer, I was just lying in bed. In reality, I was holding a plank position for 3 minutes straight. My body changed. The soft layer of fat around my midsection dissolved, replaced by lean, ropey muscle. My hands, once manicured, became rough and hard. I felt a vitality returning, a primal strength that I had not felt since my 20s working on construction sites. I was becoming a weapon. But a weapon is useless if the enemy knows it is armed. I needed Lucas to believe I was broken. I needed him to believe the machine was defunct, so he would stop checking the gauges. I decided to become the thing he claimed I was. The next time Lucas visited, it was a Tuesday. I knew it was Tuesday because the pool pump had run a cleaning cycle, which made a distinct gurgling noise. The shade on the viewing port slid open. I was sitting on the floor, rocking back and forth. I had let my beard grow wild. I had deliberately refrained from washing my hair for 3 days, letting it mat and stick to my forehead. I stared at the walleyes, unfocused. "Dad," Lucas asked. I did not answer. I kept rocking. "Dad, look at me." I turned my head slowly. I let my jaw hang slack. I tried to empty my eyes of all intelligence, all spark. I looked through him, not at him. "Where is the train?" I whispered. Lucas frowned. "What train?" "The train," I said, my voice trembling. "I have to get to the station. My father is waiting. He has the tickets." Lucas's face relaxed. The tension in his shoulders dropped. He actually smiled. "Your father has been dead for 30 years, Dad." "No," I insisted, getting to my feet unsteadily. I shuffled toward the glass, dragging my left leg, as if the stroke had impaired my motor function. "He is waiting. I have the blueprints. I need to show him the bridge." I pressed my hand against the glass, leaving a greasy smear. "Are you the conductor?" Lucas laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of amusement. "No, Dad. I am not the conductor. I am Lucas, your son." I squinted at him, tilting my head. Lucas is a baby. He is small. You are old. You look like, you look like the man from the bank." "I am the man from the bank," Lucas muttered, mostly to himself. "I own the bank now." "I want to go home," I whimpered, letting a tear leak out. I had practiced this. I thought of the betrayal and the tears came easily. "Please, sir, I want to go home. My dad is waiting." Lucas sighed, but it was a sigh of relief. He tapped the glass. "You are home, Dad. This is where you live now. Go lie down. You are confusing yourself." He closed the shade. I stood there for a moment, keeping the slack-jawed expression on my face, just in case he was still watching. Then slowly, I turned back to the room. I walked to the bed, lay down, and stared at the ceiling. It worked. Over the next 2 months, the visits became less frequent. He stopped coming once a week. It stretched to 10 days, then 2 weeks. The security checks became lazy. I noticed he stopped asking me to turn out my pockets or lift my shirt to check for contraband. He stopped scanning the room with the intensity of a warden. Why would he? I was a senile old man lost in the memories of 1975, waiting for a ghost train. He underestimated me. It is the fatal flaw of the arrogant. They believe intellect is a static quality, that once you defeat someone, they stay defeated. He did not understand that I was an engineer. I solve problems. And he was just another structural load that needed to be displaced. By the 6th month, the spoon was ready. It was an ugly thing. The handle was filed down to a sharp, flat wedge. The metal was discolored from the heat of friction. But it was solid. I tested it against the grout of the tiles. It held. I waited for the right night. I waited for a night when the wind was howling outside, masking any small noises that might travel through the ventilation ducts. I waited until the lights went dark. I dragged the bed to the center of the room, standing it on its side to use as a ladder. It was heavy, but my new muscles handled the weight with ease. I climbed up, balancing on the edge of the mattress frame. I reached up. My fingers touched the cool metal of the vent cover. I felt for the screws. There were 4 of them, 1 in each corner. I pressed the tip of my modified spoon into the slot of the first screw. It did not fit perfectly. It was a little loose. I held my breath. If I stripped the head, it was over. I would never get another chance. I applied upward pressure, pushing with my shoulder, and turned. Creak. The sound was tiny, like a cricket chirping, but the screw moved. A quarter turn. Paint flaked off, dusting my face. I turned again. Another quarter turn. My heart was hammering so hard, I thought it would trigger the seismic sensors I had installed in the foundation. But I kept turning. 1 rotation. 2. The screw was loose. I did not remove it. I tightened it back just a fraction, enough to hold the grill in place, but loose enough to be removed with my fingers later. I did the same for the other 3. I climbed down. I put the bed back. I hid the spoon. I lay in the dark, my chest heaving, sweat cooling on my skin. I had a way out. The vent led to the main HVAC trunk, which I knew ran horizontally through the ceiling of the basement corridor and exited into the mechanical room behind the garage. But I could not go yet. It was winter. The external temperature in Oregon would be freezing. I had no shoes, no coat, and no weapon. Escaping the room was only half the equation. Surviving the escape was the other. And more importantly, I did not just want to leave. I wanted to burn his world down. I needed more information. I needed to know his schedule, his codes, his weaknesses. I needed to know where he kept the backups. So I waited. I went back to scraping. I went back to exercising. And I went back to drooling and asking for the train conductor. I was patient. I was the spider in the web, and Lucas was the fly who thought he owned the house. I looked at the vent one last time before closing my eyes. It wasn't just a hole in the ceiling. It was the first variable in a long, complex equation of retribution. And I was going to solve it integer by integer. It was the 8th month. The passage of time had become a physical weight, a heaviness that settled in my marrow. I had spent 240 days breathing recycled air, 240 days staring at the same four walls, and 240 days turning a stainless steel spoon into a key. I had waited for a night when the wind was particularly violent. The Oregon winter had turned into a wet, blustery spring, and the storm outside was battering the villa, sending vibrations down through the foundation. To anyone else, it was bad weather. To me, it was acoustic camouflage. I moved the bed. I did it slowly, inch by inch, timing every shove of the mattress frame with the thunder rolling overhead. I had become a creature of patience. My muscles, honed by thousands of silent push-ups, did not tremble. I stood the frame on its side. I climbed. The ceiling vent was right there. It looked innocuous, just a white metal grate, but to me, it was the gate to heaven. I pulled the spoon from my waistband. The tip was filed to a perfect flat edge. I inserted it into the slot of the first screw. It turned. I felt a rush of adrenaline so potent, it almost made me dizzy. The screw gave way, the threads grinding softly against the metal housing. I worked it loose, caught it in my hand before it could fall, and placed it in my mouth. 1 down, 3 to go. I reached for the second screw. My confidence was surging. I was arrogant. I was so focused on the mechanics of the screw that I forgot the mechanics of the system. I had designed the security suite for this panic room 5 years ago. I wrote the protocols. I knew that the camera had a motion sensor. What I had forgotten in my eagerness was the verticality algorithm. The system was programmed to ignore movement at floor level, pacing, sleeping, falling, but it was coded to flag any rapid vertical displacement of a heat signature as a breach attempt. It was designed to detect someone trying to tamper with the sensors. I was standing on the bed frame, 6 feet in the air. The camera did not sound a siren. I had designed it to be a silent alarm alerting the security team without panicking the intruder. But I saw the change. The small, unblinking red eye on the lens housing suddenly shifted. It pulsed blue. Once. Twice. I froze. My heart stopped. I stared at that blue light, the color of a corrupted system file. I scrambled down, trying to push the bed back, trying to hide the spoon, but it was too late. Physics is fast, but electricity is faster. The heavy steel bolts of the main door retracted with a sound like a gunshot. Clack, clack, clack. I barely had time to turn around before the door swung open. It was not just Lucas. 2 men entered first. They were big, moving with the efficient, predatory grace of professionals. They wore tactical black clothing, no insignias. Private military contractors, mercenaries. One of them held a baton, the other had a taser leveled at my chest. They did not shout. They simply fanned out, securing the room in 2 seconds flat. Then Lucas walked in. He was wearing a silk dressing gown and holding a tablet. He looked annoyed. Not angry, not frightened, just deeply, inconveniently interrupted. He looked at the bed frame standing on its side. He looked at the spoon in my hand. Then he looked up at the vent, seeing the missing screw. He sighed. It was a long, disappointed exhalation. "Clear the room," he said to the men. The man with the baton stepped forward. I tensed, raising my arms to defend myself. I was ready for a beating. In fact, part of me welcomed it. A beating would prove I was a threat. A beating was something I could fight back against. But they did not hit me. The man simply ripped the spoon from my hand with a force that nearly dislocated my thumb. He patted me down, rough and impersonal, checking for other weapons. Finding none, he shoved me backward. I stumbled and fell onto the mattress that was still lying on the floor. "Secure the vent," Lucas ordered. The second guard holstered his taser, pulled a power drill from a bag he had brought, and drove 4 heavy-duty masonry screws into the vent frame, sealing it permanently to the concrete ceiling. The noise was deafening in the small space. Lucas watched the whole process with a detached curiosity. When they were done, he walked over to me. He did not help me up. He stood over me, looking down like I was a dog that had chewed a slipper. "I am disappointed, Dad," he said. "I thought we had an understanding. I thought you were accepting your new reality." "I will never accept this," I spat, scrambling to my sit-up. You can lock the door, Lucas, but you cannot lock my mind. I will get out. And when I do— When you do what? He cut me off. You will go to the police. You will call your friends. He laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. He tapped the screen of his tablet. You don't seem to understand the extent of your situation. You think you are just a prisoner. Dad, you are a ghost. You don't exist anymore. He turned the tablet screen toward me. It was a real estate listing. I sold the house, he said casually. Our house. The one you built in 1998. The one Mom died in. I felt the blood drain from my face. You couldn't. The deed. I have power of attorney. Remember, I sold it 3 months ago to a tech developer. They tore it down last week. It is a dirt lot now. They are building condos. My breath caught in my throat. And that house was everything. Every beam, every joint, every window was a memory of my wife, of Lucas's childhood. And the contents, I whispered. The library, the albums, Lucas shrugged. I put the furniture in storage. But the personal stuff, the old papers, the drafting tables, those dusty photo albums you hoarded. He paused, savoring the moment. I burned them. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. You burned them. Bonfire in the backyard before the demolition crew arrived, he said. It was quite beautiful, actually, watching all those old black and white memories curl up and turn to ash. I realized something, Dad. You are holding on to a past that nobody cares about. You are trying to escape back to a life that isn't there. There are no photos of you left. There is no house. There is no legacy. There is just this room. He leaned down, his face inches from mine. I could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. You are dead, Michael. The only reason your heart is still beating is because I am too sentimental to stop it. But do not push me. He straightened up and turned to the guards. Strip the room. What? I gasped. Take everything, Lucas commanded. The books, the extra blankets, the chair, the writing paper. Leave him the mattress and the toilet paper. If he wants to act like a rat in a cage, let him live like one. The guards moved with ruthless efficiency. They swept my small shelf of books, my precious engineering texts, my novels, my only escape from the boredom, into a bag. They took the pillows. They took the spare change of clothes. In 3 minutes, the room was barren. And one more thing, Lucas said, walking to the door. Cut the lights. Lucas, no! I screamed, lunging for him. The guard with the baton slammed the butt of the weapon into my solar plexus. I collapsed, gasping for air, curling into a fetal ball on the concrete. 7 days, Lucas said from the doorway. 7 days in the dark. Think about what you did. Think about whether you want to stay fed and comfortable or if you want to rot. The heavy steel door slammed shut. The bolts engaged. Clack, clack, clack. Then the lights went out. It was not the darkness of night. It was the darkness of a sealed tomb. It was a suffocating physical blackness that pressed against my eyes. I lay on the mattress gasping for breath, the pain in my stomach radiating outward. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the hollow, crushing agony in my chest. He had burned the photos. He had burned the image of his mother laughing at the beach. He had burned the picture of me holding him when he was a baby. He had erased the evidence that we were ever a family. For the first time in 8 months, I wept. I did not cry for my freedom. I cried for the death of my son. Because the man who had walked out of that door was not Lucas. He was a monster, wearing Lucas's skin. The next 7 days were a blur of madness. Time dissolved. Without the cycle of the lights, I lost all sense of morning or night. The pool pump above my only clock seemed to become erratic, or perhaps my mind was just slipping. The silence was absolute. The ventilation system hummed, but it was a white noise that the brain eventually deleted. I floated in a void. I slept, woke up, and did not know if I had slept for an hour or a day. I ate the meager rations they slid through the slot, cold nutrient-paced lukewarm water, but I feel my hands trembling in the dark. Sensory deprivation is a terrible thing. The mind starved of input begins to eat itself. I started seeing shapes in the blackness, geometric patterns, fractures in the dark. I heard voices. I heard my wife calling my name. I heard the sound of the house collapsing. But on the fourth day, or maybe the fifth, I heard something real. I was lying on the floor, pressing my cheek against the cold concrete near the bathroom partition, trying to cool a fever that was raging in my skull. Drip. I froze. Drip. It was faint. Incredibly faint. A tiny rhythmic impact of liquid on stone. It was coming from behind the wall, low down near the floor. I crawled toward the sound. I pressed my ear flat against the wall, where the plumbing for the toilet vanished into the concrete. Drip. 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 It was a leak. My engineer's brain, which I thought had been broken by the darkness, suddenly sparked back to life. I analyzed the sound. The viscosity sounded heavy. It wasn't the clean, sharp splash of fresh water under pressure. It was the sluggish, hollow drop of wastewater. There was a sewage line running directly behind the concrete wall, and it was leaking. I sat back in the darkness, my heart pounding. A leak meant water damage. Water damage meant erosion. But more importantly, it was what was in the pipe that mattered. Sewage is not just waste. It is a chemical cocktail. It contains ammonia. It contains methane. It creates hydrogen sulfide. I thought about the spoon. I thought about the brute force I had used to turn that screw. I thought about the camera detecting my physical movement. Lucas had stripped the room. He had taken my tools. He had taken my light. He had taken my dignity. But he had left the plumbing. He had left the chemistry. I sat there in the pitch black, and a smile stretched across my face. It was a grim, terrifying smile that no one could see. I had been trying to act like a carpenter using a hammer and a chisel. But I was not a carpenter. I was a structural engineer. And before that, I was a student of chemistry. Force is visible. Force triggers alarms. Force can be countered by men with batons. But corrosion is silent. Corrosion is invisible. Corrosion happens in the dark, molecule by molecule, until the steel snaps. Lucas wanted me to rot in the dark. Fine. I would embrace the rot. I would use the very filth he was trying to bury me in. I closed my eyes and listened to the drip. It was no longer the sound of a leak. It was the sound of a countdown. I did not need a spoon anymore. I needed time. And thanks to my son's cruelty, I had nothing but time. The brute force phase was over. The chemical warfare phase had just begun. Year 2 was not measured in hours or days. It was measured in pH levels and oxidation rates. If the first year was about the failure of physics, the second year was about the triumph of chemistry. I had stopped looking at the walls as obstacles and started looking at them as a periodic table of elements. Concrete is calcium carbonate. Steel is iron and carbon. And I was a biological machine that produced ammonia and carbon dioxide. The breakthrough came from a vanity project, literally. When I designed the room, I had argued for stainless steel fixtures, utilitarian, sterile, indestructible. Lucas, however, had insisted on an aesthetic he called industrial chic. He wanted the bunker to look like a gentleman's lounge. He had installed a vintage-style sink with exposed plumbing. I was lying on the floor one afternoon, staring at the underside of that sink, when I realized the P-trap, the U-shaped pipe beneath the drain, was not PVC. It was brass, an alloy of copper and zinc. Lucas had given me a weapon, and he did not even know it. I began my inventory. I had the brass pipe. I had the cleaning supplies Lucas dropped through the slot once a month, a bottle of chlorine-based bleach, and a generic surface cleaner. And I had my own body. I knew that urine contains urea, which breaks down into ammonia over time. I knew that ammonia, when mixed with chlorine bleach, creates chloramine gas. It is a deadly, toxic vapor. If I mixed them in the toilet bowl, I would be dead in 10 minutes. But I was not trying to kill myself. I was trying to kill the steel. I needed an acid. A corrosive agent that would eat into the molecular bonds of the locking mechanism, without releasing a cloud of gas that would set off the atmospheric sensors. I looked at the fruit cups on my dinner tray. Peaches in heavy syrup, sugar. If I could ferment the sugar, I could create acetic acid. Vinegar. Weak, yes, but persistent. If I mixed that with the salt from the crackers and the ammonia from my own waste, I could create a corrosive sludge, a primitive homemade oxidizer designed to accelerate rust. I became a medieval alchemist in a modern dungeon. I found a loose tile behind the toilet, the same place I had hidden my spoon. I carefully pried it up. In the hollow space underneath, I created my laboratory. I saved the syrup from the fruit cups. I saved the sugar packets from the coffee tray. I mixed them with a small amount of water and let them sit in the dark, warm space. It took weeks for the fermentation to start. The smell was sour like rotting garbage, but the air filtration system was efficient enough to scrub it away before it reached the sensors. Once the mixture turned to a thick acidic goo, I added the salt. Then began the application. The door was held shut by 3 steel throw bolts. They extended from the door into a steel striker plate embedded in the concrete frame. I could not reach the bolts themselves, but I could reach the gap. Every night while the camera slept, or while I was in the blind spot, I used a shred of my shirt, wrapped around a plastic fork handle, to daub the mixture into the hairline crack between the door and the frame. I pushed the acidic sludge deep into the mechanism. It was a microscopic war. The acid would attack the protective coating of the steel. Once the coating was compromised, the salt and moisture would invite the oxygen in. Rust is not just a stain, it is a disease. Iron oxide occupies more volume than steel. As it grows, it expands. It forces the metal apart from the inside. I was inducing oxide jacking. I wanted the rust to eat the threads of the internal screws to weaken the shear strength of the latch. I did this every single day for 14 months. But the application required access to the door, and access to the door required Lucas to stay away from it. If he inspected the frame closely, he would see the orange stain of corrosion. He would smell the vinegar. I needed to make the door the most repulsive place in the room. I decided to destroy the last thing I had left my dignity. When Lucas came for his visits, usually once every 3 weeks now, I stopped cleaning myself. I stopped shaving. I let my hair become a greasy, matted mess. But I went further. The next time the viewing port slid open, I was standing right in front of it. I was wearing only my underwear. I looked him in the eye, let my jaw go slack, and urinated on the floor. The yellow liquid pooled around my bare feet and splashed against the bottom of the door. Lucas recoiled. I saw his face contort in genuine horror and disgust. He stepped back from the glass, covering his nose with a silk handkerchief. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, his voice muffled by the glass. "Look at you. You are an animal." "Warm," I mumbled, stepping in the puddle and splashing it toward the doorframe. "The water is warm." "Get back," he shouted. "Stay away from the glass." He slammed the shade shut. It worked. He stopped sending the guards in to clean. He stopped checking the perimeter. He began tossing the food trays through the slot, as if he were feeding a rabid dog, terrified that I might touch him. He would not come within 3 feet of that door if he could help it. The urine masked the smell of the fermenting acid. The filth hid the rust stains. My humiliation was my camouflage. But something else happened during those visits. Something I had not calculated, but which proved to be just as valuable as the acid. Because Lucas thought I was gone, because he saw a senile, incontinent, broken old man who played in his own waste, he stopped filtering his words. He stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as an object, a confessional booth. He was lonely. It is the specific loneliness of the successful criminal. He could not talk to his employees, they were liabilities. He could not talk to his friends, they were competitors. But he could talk to the crazy old man in the basement. It started in the 18th month. He came down with a bottle of wine. He did not open the slot. He just leaned against the glass, drinking straight from the bottle. I closed the deal on the waterfront project today, he said, his voice slightly slurred. Project Pegasus. Do you remember that, Dad? No, of course you don't. You don't remember your own name. I sat in the corner, rocking back and forth, staring at the floor. But my ears were tuned to the frequency of his voice. 40 million, he laughed. The investors think we are building eco-friendly condos. They have no idea the land is a designated brownfield site. Toxic soil. We will never get the permits. He took a swig of wine. I routed the deposit through the shell company in Panama. Redwood Holdings. Nice name, right? Sounds sturdy. I filed that name away. Redwood Holdings. And the best part, Lucas continued, sliding down to sit against the door. I used your old engineering seal to stamp the soil stability reports. Just a digital copy, of course. But legally, if it all goes south, it looks like Michael Jones signed off on it before he went crazy. Rage is a hot fire, but hate is cold. I sat there listening to him implicate me in his fraud, and I felt nothing but a frosty clarity. You should see the accounts, Dad, he whispered. The Cayman account is beautiful. It has 8 zeros. Account number 77392041. Bank of Georgetown. I closed my eyes. 7. I visualized a structural column 7 stories high. 7. A second column identical to the first. 3. A triangular truss connecting them. 9. A cantilevered balcony extending out. 2. Twin spiral staircases. 0. A circular fountain in the lobby. 4. 4 main elevators. 1. A single antenna on the roof. I built the building in my mind. I locked the number into the architecture of my memory. As long as I could visualize that building, I would never forget the account number. Lucas kept talking. He talked for an hour. He listed the names of the politicians he had bribed. He listed the safety inspectors he had paid off. He told me about the Ponzi scheme he was running with the pension funds of the local teachers' union. He poured his guilt, his arrogance, and his secrets into the room, thinking they were evaporating into the air. He did not know he was speaking into a recording device. My brain became a hard drive. I categorized every name, every date, every dollar amount. I created a mental filing cabinet organizing the crimes by jurisdiction and severity. I am a genius, Dad, Lucas mumbled, finishing the bottle. I did what you never could. I beat the system. He stood up, swayed slightly, and looked through the glass at me. I was drooling slightly, picking at a loose thread on my shirt. Look at you, he sneered. The great Michael Jones. You are nothing but a stain on the floor. He left. I waited until the sound of his footsteps faded completely. I waited until the lights dimmed to the night setting. Then I stood up. I wiped the drool from my chin. I walked to the door, stepping over the dried filth. I pulled my shirt tail out and dipped it into the hidden reservoir of fermented acid I kept behind the tile. I knelt by the doorframe. With the precision of a surgeon, I applied the mixture to the bottom hinge. I could see the metal pitting. I could see the rust blooming like a beautiful dark flower. I am not a stain, Lucas, I whispered to the empty room. I am the rust. I checked the integrity of the hinge. It was weakening. The metal was flaking. Another 6 months, maybe less. I went back to my corner and sat down. I reviewed the file in my head. Redwood Holdings, Project Pegasus, Bank of Georgetown, account 77392041. He had taken my freedom. He had taken my name. But he had given me the combination to his destruction. And when I walked out of this room, I was not just going to escape. I was going to bankrupt him. I lay down on the mattress, listening to the hum of the ventilation. I was surrounded by the stench of urine and vinegar, but for the first time in 2 years, I slept peacefully. I knew exactly who I was. I was the evidence. The storm had been raging for 2 days. I could feel it, even 70 feet underground. It was not the wind I felt, nor the rain lashing against the trees I could no longer see. It was the vibration. The villa above was a massive structure, a cantilevered masterpiece of glass and steel anchored into the hillside. When the wind gusts hit 60 or 70 miles per hour, they transferred kinetic energy down through the structural columns, vibrating the rebar skeleton of the house like a tuning fork. I lay on my mattress, pressing my hand against the cold concrete floor, reading the tremors. This was not a standard winter squall. This was a bomb cyclone. I knew the atmospheric pressure was dropping rapidly because the air in the room felt thinner, heavier. The ventilation system was struggling to maintain positive pressure against the vacuum being created outside. I sat up. My heart began to beat with a slow, heavy rhythm. For 730 days, I had been a prisoner. But for the last 400 days, I had been a saboteur. I looked at the steel door. To the naked eye, it looked the same as it always had, imposing, impenetrable, a wall of gray metal. But I knew better. I knew that deep inside the striker plate, where the chemical sludge of vinegar and ammonia had been seeping for over a year, the molecular bonds of the steel were screaming. The rust had done its work. The iron oxide had expanded, flaking away the strength of the latch, turning solid metal into a brittle, porous honeycomb. But the rust alone was not enough. The door was held by two systems. The first was the mechanical throw-bolt system, the one I had corroded. The second was a fail-safe magnetic lock, an electromagnet capable of holding 1,200 pounds of force. As long as the power was on, that door would not budge, even if the bolts turned to dust. I needed the power to die. I knew the electrical schematics of this house better than I knew the lines on my own face. I had designed the backup power protocols. The villa was connected to the main Oregon power grid. If the grid failed, which it often did during storms of this magnitude, the system was programmed to switch to the diesel generator, buried in the localized utility shed. But there was a gap. It was a flaw I had noticed 5 years ago during the commissioning phase, a flaw I had meant to fix but never got around to. The automatic transfer switch, or ATS, had a delay. To prevent a power surge from frying the sensitive smart home electronics, the system was programmed to sever the connection to the grid, wait exactly 10 seconds for the residual voltage to dissipate, and then engage the generator. 10 seconds. For 10 seconds, the house would be dead. For 10 seconds, the cameras would be blind. And for 10 seconds, the electromagnet holding my door shut would de-energize. During those 10 seconds, the only thing holding me in this concrete box would be the mechanical bolts. The bolts I had spent 14 months murdering with acid. I stood up. I began to stretch. I rotated my shoulders, feeling the pop of cartilage. I was 64 years old. My hair was long and white. My beard reached my chest and my skin was pale as parchment. I looked like a biblical prophet who had been swallowed by a whale. But underneath that withered exterior, my muscles were tight cables of desperation. I had done thousands of push-ups. I had visualized this moment 1,000,000 times. I moved the mattress. I shoved it hard against the wall opposite the door. I needed a runway. The room was 40 square meters. That gave me about 20 feet of sprinting distance. I took my position. I placed my back against the far wall. I dug my bare heels into the concrete, searching for traction. I waited. Above me, the storm escalated. A crack of thunder, muffled by the earth but still audible, rolled through the ceiling. The lights in the room flickered. My pulse spiked. Steady, I told myself. Wait for the blackout. Do not move until the world ends. The lights flickered again. The hum of the ventilation system wavered, dropping in pitch as the voltage sagged. The grid was struggling. A tree had likely fallen on a line somewhere miles away. The transformers were blowing out. I closed my eyes and visualized the automatic transfer switch in the garage. I saw the copper contacts trembling. Then it happened. The hum died. The lights vanished instantly, plunging the room into a darkness so absolute it felt physical. Click. The sound was sharp and beautiful. It was the sound of the magnetic lock disengaging. 1. I pushed off the wall. 2. I exploded forward. I was not running, I was launching myself. Every ounce of anger, every meal of cold paste, every moment of humiliation I had endured fueled my legs. 3. I crossed the center of the room. I was blind in the dark, but I did not need to see. I knew exactly where the door was. 4. I gritted my teeth. I braced my right shoulder. I did not slow down. I was going to hit that steel door with the force of a battering ram. If the bolts held, I would shatter my collarbone. I would likely break my arm. I might even crack my skull. I did not care. Pain was irrelevant. Freedom was the only metric. 5. Impact. I hit the door with everything I had. The sensation was violent. It felt like running into a parked car. The shockwave jarred my spine, snapping my head back. A scream of agony tore from my throat as my shoulder took the brunt of the collision. But then came the sound. It was not the dull thud of a body hitting a solid wall. It was a crunch. A sick, metallic screeching sound like a car grinding its gears, followed by a loud snap. The rusted bolts, eaten away by salt and vinegar, hollowed out by months of chemical warfare, could not withstand the kinetic energy. The sheer strength was gone. The door gave way. I stumbled forward, my momentum carrying me through the open archway. I fell hard onto the concrete floor of the corridor outside, scraping my knees, gasping for air. I lay there for a second, stunned. The air here was different. It was still basement air, musty and cool, but it was different. It was unrestricted. It was the air of the corridor, not the cell. 6. I scrambled to my feet. My shoulder was throbbing with a pulse of white-hot fire, but I could move it. Nothing was broken. 7. I heard the whine of the diesel generator spooling up in the distance. The 10 seconds were almost up. 8. I looked down the long, dark hallway toward the stairs. Freedom. The exit was up there. The storm was up there. 9. The lights in the corridor flickered. The emergency floods buzzed to life, bathing the hallway in a crimson-red glow. 10. Clack. Behind me, the magnetic lock on the panic room door re-engaged. If I had been 1 second slower, if I had hesitated, I would have slammed into a locked door and broken my bones for nothing. The generator roared to life, its vibration humming through the floor. The power was back. The cameras were rebooting. I had to go. I had to run. But I stopped. I froze in the red light of the emergency corridor, my hand gripping the wall for support. I looked back at the open door of my prison. The room was empty. The mattress lay on the floor. The toilet sat in the corner. It was a wretched, hateful place. But I had left something behind. My mind was a steel trap. I had memorized the account numbers, the names, the dates. Bank of Georgetown. Account 7739-2041. I had repeated it like a mantra every single night. But what if I fell? What if in the escape I took a blow to the head? What if the trauma of the storm, or a confrontation with Lucas, wiped my short-term memory? The brain is fragile. A concussion could erase the last 2 years of data. I could not risk it. I turned around. I stepped back into the cell. I dropped to my knees beside the mattress. I ripped at the seam I had carefully picked open months ago, buried deep on the underside where the camera could not see. I plunged my hand into the foam padding. My fingers brushed against the rough texture of cardboard. I pulled it out. It was a stack of 5 flattened cracker boxes, tied together with a thread pulled from my blanket. This was my diary. On the back of these cardboard scraps, etched into the gray surface, with the sharpened point of a chicken bone, I had saved from a rare meal of leftovers, was the map of hell. I had written down everything, every transaction Lucas had drunkenly confessed to, every name, every offshore shell company. I had used a cipher, a simple engineering code based on structural load abbreviations, so that if Lucas found it, he would think it was just the scribblings of a madman trying to calculate the weight of the roof. But to me, it was an indictment. I clutched the bundle of cardboard to my chest. It felt heavier than gold. This was not just paper. This was my insurance policy. This was the weapon that would cut Lucas deeper than any knife. I stood up, shoved the makeshift diary into the waistband of my underwear, the only clothing I had, and turned back to the door. The red emergency light bathed the room in the color of blood. I looked at the camera in the corner. The lens was cycling through its reboot sequence. It turned toward me. The LED indicator shifted from amber to green. It saw me. I smiled at it. A feral, bared-teeth smile. "I am coming for you, son," I whispered. I turned and ran. I sprinted into the corridor. My bare feet slapped against the cold concrete. I ignored the pain in my shoulder. I ignored the dizziness from the adrenaline dump. I ran toward the floating staircase at the end of the hall. The stairs were steel open-riser architectural and cold. I took them two at a time, hauling myself up by the railing. I reached the top of the stairs. The door to the main house was a heavy oak panel. It was locked. I did not have a key, but I did not need one. This was an interior door. It was solid wood, yes, but the frame was merely decorative pine nailed into drywall. It was not a security door. It was a privacy door. I backed up 3 steps. I lowered my good shoulder. I channeled every ounce of rage I had stored for 2 years. I smashed into the wood near the handle. The frame splintered. The wood groaned but held. I hit it again. Crack. The jamb gave way. The door flew open, crashing against the wall inside. I stumbled into the kitchen. The sensory overload was immediate and staggering. The kitchen was massive, illuminated by the flashes of lightning tearing through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The storm was right there, just behind the glass. The trees outside were bending double, thrashing like drowning men. Rain hammered against the windows in sheets, sounding like gravel being thrown by a giant hand. It was freezing. The power outage had killed the heating system, but the cold here was different. It was fresh. It smelled of ozone and expensive leather and fear. I stood in the center of the kitchen, shivering violently. I was half naked, emaciated, clutching a stack of cardboard scraps, standing in the middle of a multi-million-dollar mansion. The house was silent, except for the storm. The generator was powering the essential circuits, the security system, the refrigerators, the emergency lights, but the main overhead lights were off. Shadows stretched long and dancing across the marble countertops. I scanned the room. I needed to move. The camera in the basement had seen me. If Lucas was in the house, his phone would be alerting him right now. If the security team was on shift, they would be coming. But the house felt empty. There was a stillness to it, a vacancy that felt wrong. I moved toward the hallway that led to the garage. I needed a vehicle, or at least a weapon. As I passed the grand foyer, a flash of lightning illuminated the space. I saw the front door. It was glass reinforced, staring out into the black maw of the driveway. Then I heard it. The sound of a car engine. Not the generator. A car. I froze, pressing myself into the shadows of the coat closet. Headlights swept across the front windows, blindingly bright, cutting through the rain. A car was pulling up the driveway. It was moving fast, too fast for the conditions. It skidded on the wet pavement tires, crunching over the gravel. It was a black SUV. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was it the security team? Had the silent alarm tripped the moment I broke the basement seal? The car door opened. A figure stepped out into the rain. He was struggling with an umbrella that instantly inverted in the wind. He abandoned it, running toward the front door, hunched over against the gale. I recognized the silhouette, the tailored coat, the frantic, arrogant gait. It was Lucas. He was home early. The storm must have canceled his gala. Or maybe the power outage at the house had sent a priority alert to his phone, bringing him back to check on his prisoner. He reached the front door, fumbling with his keys. I could hear him cursing over the sound of the wind. "Stupid piece of junk. Come on." I stood in the dark hallway 10 feet away from him. I was shivering, but my hands were steady. I clutched the cardboard diary tighter. I could have run toward the back door. I could have tried to slip out the patio entrance while he was distracted. But I didn't. I watched the lock on the front door turn. I watched the handle depress. The door opened, and a gust of wind and rain exploded into the foyer, soaking the expensive rug. Lucas stepped inside, slamming the door behind him to shut out the storm. He leaned against it, shaking the water from his hair, exhaling a long breath of relief. He reached out to the keypad on the wall to disarm the alarm system. "Damn generator," he muttered. "I have to reset the whole board." He didn't look into the shadows. He didn't see the ghost standing by the closet. He walked past me. He was so close I could smell his cologne sandalwood, and arrogance mixed with the smell of wet wool. He walked straight toward the kitchen, toward the basement door. He was going down to check on me. I waited until his back was fully turned. I waited until he was 5 steps past me. I stepped out of the shadows. "Hello, Lucas," I said. My voice was a ruin. It was a rasp of gravel and disuse, cracked and broken. But in the silence of the house, it sounded like thunder. Lucas stopped. He froze mid-step, 1 foot raised like a statue. He didn't turn around immediately. For a second, I think he believed he was hallucinating. I think he believed the guilt had finally manifested a voice in his head. "Dad!" He whispered the word, trembling in the air. He turned around slowly. Lightning flashed again, a brilliant jagged fork that lit up the foyer with a stark, blue-white brilliance. It illuminated me, the wild white hair, the matted beard, the ribs showing through my skin, the scars on my shoulders, and the eyes. The eyes of a man who had crawled out of his own grave. Lucas's face went white. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He dropped his keys. They hit the marble floor with a loud clang. "The door was rusty," I said softly. "You should have used stainless steel." He stared at me, his eyes wide with a terror that was absolute. He wasn't looking at his father. He was looking at his reckoning. "No," he stammered, taking a step back. "No, you're locked in. I saw you." "Chemistry," I said, taking a step toward him. "It's a slow science, but it always works." Lucas looked at the basement door behind him, then back at me. He looked at the front door, blocked by the storm. He realized he was trapped. "Security!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Security." "They can't hear you," I said. "The storm is too loud, and the phones are down." I took another step. "Stay back." He fumbled inside his coat. He pulled out a gun, a small black pistol. He pointed it at me. His hand was shaking so badly the barrel was vibrating. "I'll shoot," he screamed. "I swear to God I'll shoot you." I stopped. I looked at the gun. Then I looked at his eyes. "You already killed me 2 years ago," I said. "You can't kill a ghost, Lucas." The lights flickered again. The generator surged. I had the diary. I had the truth. And now I had his fear. I turned and ran toward the kitchen, not toward him, but toward the side garage entrance. "Stop!" Lucas fired. Bang! The bullet shattered a vase on the console table next to me. Shards of porcelain exploded outward. I didn't stop. I bolted into the kitchen, sliding on the marble floor, scrambling toward the heavy fire door that led to the garage. I knew where the cars were. I knew where the tools were. And I knew that the hunt had just begun. The hallway on the second floor was a canyon of shadows. I moved with my back pressed against the wainscoting, my bare feet, making no sound on the plush Persian runner. I was a ghost, haunting the house I had paid for. The adrenaline from the basement breakout was beginning to fade, replaced by a cold, crystalline focus. I was shivering not from the temperature, but from the sheer exposure. For 2 years, my world had been 40 square meters of concrete. Now, the open space of the hallway felt agoraphobic. Every doorway was a potential ambush. Every window was an eye looking in. The house was silent. The storm outside battered the glass, a chaotic symphony of wind and rain that masked the sound of my breathing. The generator was humming somewhere deep in the earth, keeping the essential systems alive, but the main lights remained off. I needed to blind the house. I knew exactly where the brain of the villa was located. I had designed it. At the end of the east wing, behind a false bookcase in the library, was the server room. It controlled everything: the climate, the locks, the communications, and most importantly, the surveillance. I reached the library door. It was ajar. I slipped inside, the smell of old paper and leather hitting me like a physical blow. It was the smell of my old life, a life Lucas had stolen and burned. I ignored the pang of nostalgia and moved to the bookcase. I found the hidden latch, a specific volume on structural dynamics that had to be tilted forward. Click. The bookcase swung open. The server room was bathed in the cool blue light of the LED status indicators. It was freezing in here. The dedicated air conditioning unit was running on the emergency circuit to protect the hardware. The hum of the cooling fans was deafening after the silence of the hallway. I stepped inside and scanned the racks. There were 3 towers. Rack 1, home automation and media. Rack 2, external communications and firewall. Rack 3, security. I moved to Rack 3. I could have smashed it. I could have ripped the wires out. But destruction is messy. Destruction triggers tamper alarms. I needed to be surgical. I located the network video recorder unit. It was writing data to a RAID array of hard drives. I found the fiber optic cable that connected the NVR to the main router, the uplink, that allowed Lucas to view the cameras remotely on his phone. I did not cut it. If I cut it, the system would send a loss of signal alert. Instead, I reached behind the rack and found the maintenance loop. I used my thumbnail to depress the release clip on the Ethernet port for the uplink. I pulled the plug out just a fraction of an inch, enough to break the connection, but not enough to look unplugged. The link light on the front of the panel flickered and died. To the system, it would look like a minor packet loss error caused by the storm. To Lucas, his phone would just spin, trying to connect. He would blame the weather. Next, I turned to the hard drives. I needed to erase the footage of my escape. I ejected the primary drive, the one labeled basement/corridor. I slid the heavy metal rectangle into the waistband of my underwear, adding it to the stack of cardboard that was already chafing my skin. I was invisible again. Now I needed a voice. I left the server room and moved to Lucas's study. It was across the hall. The door was unlocked. The room smelled of expensive cigars and brandy, the scent of a man who thinks he has won. I moved to the desk. It was a massive slab of imported mahogany. I pulled open the drawers, searching. I knew Lucas. He was paranoid. He loved gadgets. He wouldn't rely on cell towers in a remote location like this. Top drawer, checkbooks. Middle drawer, a handgun holster empty. That chilled me. Bottom drawer, gold bullion coins and passports. I checked the credenza behind the desk. There, tucked between 2 bottles of scotch, was a Pelican case. I popped the latches. Inside sat an Iridium satellite phone. I powered it up. The screen glowed green. Searching for signal. I moved to the window, shielding the glow with my body. The storm was heavy, but satellite signals can punch through rain if you have a line of sight. I waited. 1 bar, 2 bars. I dialed a number I had not called in 2 years. A number I had memorized 30 years ago. Ring, ring. Yeah. The voice was gravelly tired. Robert. Don't hang up, I whispered. My voice was raspy, unrecognizable even to myself. Who is this? Robert asked sharply. It is 3 a.m. It's Michael. Silence. A long, heavy silence that stretched across the phone line. That is not funny, Robert said, his voice dropping an octave. Michael Jones is dead. I went to his memorial service. I am not dead, Bob, but I will be if you don't listen to me. Ask me something only I would know. Ask me about the fishing trip in Alaska. What year was it? Robert asked instantly. 1998. We didn't catch a damn thing, but you fell in the river and lost your wedding ring. We replaced it at a pawn shop in Anchorage so Helen wouldn't kill you. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Mike, Jesus. Mike. Where are you? Lucas said you had a stroke. He said you were in Switzerland. Lucas lied. I am in the basement, Bob. I have been in the basement for 2 years. Oh my God. Listen to me. I just broke out. I am in the house. I cannot call the police. Lucas owns the local sheriff. I heard him bragging about the bribes. If the cops come, They will just hand me back to him. Tell me what to do, Robert said. The shock was gone, replaced by the professional tone of a man who used to hunt fugitives for the FBI. I need an extraction, but not yet. I need you to get a team, people we trust, and I need you to look up a company called Vanguard Horizon. They are merging tomorrow. Merging. It is a scam, Bob. A billion-dollar Ponzi scheme. I have the proof. I have the ledger. But I need to survive the night. Suddenly, headlights swept across the ceiling of the study. I threw myself to the floor. Through the rain-streaked window, I saw the twin beams of a vehicle cutting through the darkness of the driveway. It was a large, black SUV moving fast. "He is here," I whispered. "Lucas." "Yes, and he is not alone. There is a second car behind him." "Mike, get out of there. Run into the woods." "I can't. I am barefoot, half naked, and it is a blizzard out there. I would freeze to death in an hour. I have to stay close." "Where are you going to hide?" "The one place he won't look. The place where he keeps his trophies." I hung up. I powered down the phone and shoved it into my waistband. I ran. I left the study and sprinted toward the service staircase at the back of the house. This stairwell led directly down to the integrated garage. I moved fast, taking the steps 3 at a time, ignoring the burning pain in my shoulder. I burst into the garage. It was a cavernous space, smelling of rubber gasoline and wax. It housed Lucas's collection of supercars, a Ferrari, a Porsche, a McLaren. They sat there like sleek, predatory beasts, gleaming under the weak emergency lights. But in the far corner, covered by a dusty tarp, was a shape I recognized. My 1967 Mustang. Lucas hadn't sold it. He had kept it. Probably as an ironic keepsake, or maybe he just hadn't gotten around to it. I ran to it. The clearance was low, less than 8 inches. I was emaciated, my ribs protruding, my stomach concave from 2 years of starvation. For the first time, my malnutrition was an asset. I dropped to my stomach and shimmied under the car. The concrete floor was freezing, stained with oil. I pulled myself deep into the center, positioning my body between the exhaust pipes and the transmission. I curled my legs up, making myself as small as possible. The garage door motor whirred to life. The heavy bay door rolled up, letting in the roar of the storm. The wind howled into the garage, sending dead leaves skittering across the floor. The black SUV pulled in, its tires hissing on the wet concrete. It parked 2 spots away from the Mustang. Then, a second car pulled in. A heavy sedan. The garage door rolled down, sealing the silence back inside. I held my breath. I could see their feet from my vantage point. The driver's door of the SUV opened. Expensive Italian loafers stepped out. Lucas. "I am telling you, the weather is a nightmare," Lucas said. His voice was echoing in the garage, loud and agitated. "But everything is ready. The power outage is just a temporary glitch." The passenger door of the sedan opened. A pair of shoes stepped out that did not belong in Oregon. They were handmade leather brogues, pointed, polished to a mirror shine despite the rain. The trousers were sharp, tailored wool. "The weather does not concern me, Lucas," a voice said. It was deep, heavily accented, Russian. "The signature concerns me. My partners are anxious." "You will have the signature," Lucas said. "Tonight." I froze. Tonight I thought I had time. I thought the merger was days away. "The old man is ready," the Russian asked. Lucas laughed. It was a nervous sound. "The old man is a vegetable. He will sign whatever I put in front of his hand. I have him prepped. He is heavily sedated." My blood ran cold. Lucas didn't know I was gone. He had come home early because of the storm, yes, but also because the timeline had moved up. He was bringing the Russian here to the house to witness the signing. He was planning to drag me out of the basement, drug me, and use my hand to sign away $1 billion. "Good," the Russian said. "We sign at midnight. Then the transfer initiates. Once the money clears in the Cayman account, your debt to the Bratva is resolved." Bratva. The Russian Mafia. This wasn't just white-collar crime. Lucas had borrowed money from the mob to float his hedge fund. He wasn't just stealing to get rich. He was stealing to stay alive. "Let's go upstairs," Lucas said. "I have a bottle of Louis XIII waiting. I just need to go down and fetch the signatory." They began to walk toward the door, connecting the garage to the house. I watched their feet pass inches from my face. I saw the glint of a gun holstered at the Russian's ankle. "Make sure he is presentable," the Russian said. "I do not want to smell the nursing home on him." "Don't worry," Lucas said, opening the door. "I'll clean him up." The door clicked shut behind them. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My heart was hammering against the cold concrete floor. I was trapped. I was under a car in a garage with no exit except the main door, which was now closed. Upstairs were a desperate man and a Russian mobster, waiting for a victim who wasn't there. Lucas was going to the basement. He was going to open the door. He was going to see the empty room. He was going to see the broken latch. He would know. In approximately 3 minutes, Lucas would realize his father was loose in the house. And he would realize that his billion-dollar deal in his life depended on finding me before the Russian noticed I was missing. I looked at the oil pan above my face. I looked at the cardboard diary tucked in my waistband. I had to move. I couldn't stay under the car. When Lucas found the empty cell, the first place he would check would be the perimeter. Then he would lock down the house. But I had an advantage. Lucas thought he was hunting a scared, confused old man. He didn't know he was hunting the engineer who built the hunting ground. I slid out from under the Mustang. I stood up, wiping the oil from my arms. I looked at the fuse box on the far wall of the garage. It controlled the external security lighting and the gate mechanism. I wasn't going to run. Not anymore. If they wanted a signature, I would give them one. But it wouldn't be on a contract. I moved toward the door to the house. The hunter had just become the prey, and the game was about to change. The garage was a dead end, but only for a car. For a man willing to crawl, it was an airlock. I heard the muffled scream from inside the house. It was faint, filtered through the insulated walls, but unmistakable. It was Lucas. He had reached the basement. He had seen the empty room. I had seconds. I ran to the back of the garage where the ventilation louvers for the exhaust fans were set into the wall. I grabbed the handle of the service lever. It was rusted stiff. I threw my weight against it. With a screech of protesting metal, the louvers opened. The gap was narrow, barely 12 inches high, but it opened directly into the backyard. I didn't hesitate. I dove through the opening headfirst, scraping my back against the metal frame, tumbling out onto the wet, freezing grass. The storm hit me instantly. The wind was a physical force knocking me sideways. The rain was sleet sharp as needles. I scrambled to my feet, slipping in the mud. I didn't look back at the house. I ran. I ran toward the tree line. The forest was pitch black, a wall of thrashing shadows. I plunged into it. Branches whipped my face, tearing at my skin. Thorns shredded my bare feet. I didn't feel it. I was running on a cocktail of adrenaline and pure distilled survival instinct. Behind me, the floodlights of the villa snapped on, sweeping the yard. I heard shouting. I heard the engine of the SUV roaring to life. They were coming. I didn't stop. I knew this land. I had surveyed it myself 20 years ago. I knew that 3 miles due east there was an old logging road that connected to the main highway. It was overgrown, treacherous in a storm, but it was my only chance. The next hour was a blur of agony. I fell countless times. I crawled through mud. I waded through a creek that was swollen with freezing runoff, the water rising to my chest, threatening to sweep me away. My body was shutting down. Hypothermia was setting in. My fingers were numb. My lips were frozen. But my mind was burning hot. Account 77392041. Redwood Holdings, Lucas Jones. I repeated the data like a prayer. It kept me moving. Finally, I saw headlights. Not the searching beams of the SUV, but stationary lights parked on the shoulder of the old logging road. A sedan. I stumbled out of the brush, collapsing onto the gravel. I waved my arms, a ragged skeletal figure emerging from the night. The car door opened. A figure stepped out, holding a flashlight. "Michael!" It was Robert. He ran to me. He caught me just as my legs gave out. I fell into his arms, soaking his trench coat with mud and freezing water. "Jesus Christ, Mike," he whispered, his voice shaking. He shone the light on my face. "Look at you. My God, look at you." He saw the beard, the ribs, the scars, the wild eyes. He saw the ghost of his best friend. "Get me!" In the car, I chattered, my teeth clacking together so hard I thought they would crack. He dragged me into the passenger seat. He blasted the heat. He stripped off his own coat and wrapped it around me. He pulled a thermos of coffee from the back and forced it to my lips. "We are going to the hospital," Robert said, putting the car in gear. "You need a doctor. You need the police." "No." I grabbed his arm. My grip was weak, but my eyes were fierce. "No hospitals, no police. Lucas owns them, or the Russians do. If I go to the hospital, I am dead before morning." "Mike, you are hypothermic. You are starving." "I am fine," I lied. "Drive. Take me to your safe house. The cabin in the mountains. The one nobody knows about." Robert looked at me. He saw the resolve in my eyes. He nodded. "Okay, the cabin." We drove in silence for 2 hours. I drifted in and out of consciousness, clutching the sodden mass of cardboard in my lap. When we arrived at the cabin, Robert helped me inside. He started a fire. He made soup. He gave me clothes, his old sweats too big for my emaciated frame. I sat by the fire, shivering, eating the soup with trembling hands. Robert sat opposite me, watching me with a mixture of horror and awe. 2 years, he whispered. We all thought you were happy. Lucas showed us photos. He showed us emails. They were fake, I said. Everything was fake. I reached into the pocket of the damp coat I was wearing and pulled out the cardboard. I laid the soggy pieces on the coffee table. This is real, I said. This is where the money is. What is that? A ledger. Lucas is merging Vanguard Horizon with a shell company tomorrow night. It is a wash. He is laundering $1 billion of Russian mob money and disappearing. He thinks I am dead. Or he thinks I am running scared in the woods. I looked at Robert. I need a favor, Bob. Anything, name it. I need a suit, a good one, tailored. I need a haircut. And I need a laptop with a satellite uplink. You want to go to the authorities? No, I said. I want to go to the party. Robert stared at me. The merger party, Mike, that is suicide. He will have security. He will have the Russians. Exactly. That is where he will feel safe. That is where he will be arrogant. And that is where I will kill him. Kill him! Robert's eyes widened. Mike, you are not a killer. I am not going to shoot him, Bob. I am going to kill his life. I am going to kill his reputation. I am going to kill his future. I am going to strip him naked in front of the world, just like he stripped me. The next morning was a transformation. Robert brought a barber to the cabin, a man he trusted who asked no questions. I sat in the chair as the scissors snipped away 2 years of neglect. The long white hair fell to the floor. The matted beard was shaved off. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize the man staring back. I was gaunt. My cheekbones were sharp as blades. My skin was pale, but I looked dangerous. I looked like a hawk. The softness of the retired engineer was gone. In its place was something harder, something forged in the dark. Robert brought the suit. It was a dark navy wool, expensive structured. It hid my skeletal frame. It gave me shoulders. I put it on. I tied the tie. I slid the cufflinks into place. I walked into the living room. Robert was sitting at the laptop I had requested. I ran the numbers you gave me, he said without looking up. The account at the Bank of Georgetown. It exists. And the shell company, Redwood Holdings. It is registered to a P. O. box in Cyprus. Does it link to Lucas? Not directly, but, Robert smiled grimly. I found the digital signature on the incorporation papers. It matches the IP address of the server in your villa. Got him, I whispered. There is more, Robert said. I checked the guest list for the merger gala tonight. It is at the Grand Hotel in Portland. High security. Invitation only. Can you get me in? I still have friends in the bureau, Robert said. I can get you a credential. Special consultant. It will get you past the door, I nodded. I sat down at the table. I picked up the Iridium phone. I need to record something. I set up the phone to record video. I sat in front of the lens. I straightened my tie. My name is Michael Jones, I began. My voice was stronger now, steady. If you are watching this, I am likely dead. For the past 2 years, I have been held prisoner by my son Lucas Jones in the basement of my own home. I spoke for 20 minutes. I laid out everything. The embezzlement, the Russians, the forgery, the dates, the times, the account numbers. I held up the cardboard diary to the camera. I explained the chemistry of the lock. When I was done, I uploaded the file to a secure cloud server. I set a dead man switch. If I didn't log in every 24 hours to reset the timer, the video would automatically be emailed to the FBI, the SEC, the New York Times, and the Bratva. Why send it to the Russians? Robert asked, watching me work. Because, I said, closing the laptop. If the FBI catches Lucas, he goes to prison. If the Russians find out he stole from them and got caught, prison will look like a vacation. I stood up. I felt a strange calm settling over me. The fear was gone. The anger was gone. There was only the mission. Are you ready? Robert asked. He was holding a gun. I am coming with you. No guns, I said. We don't need them. We have the truth. I am bringing it anyway, Robert said, tucking it into his waistband. Just in case the truth needs backup. We walked out to the car. The storm had passed. The sky was a brilliant cold blue. The air smelled of pine and wet earth. It smelled like freedom. But freedom wasn't enough. Not anymore. Self-preservation had evolved. In the basement, self-preservation meant staying alive. It meant eating the paste and doing the push-ups. But out here, self-preservation meant ensuring the predator could never hunt again. It meant removing the threat permanently. Lucas thought he was the apex predator. He thought he was the lion. He didn't realize that he had just let a hunter out of the cage. Let's go, I said. I have a party to crash. The grand ballroom of the Portland Monarch Hotel smelled of money. It was a specific scent, a blend of Lily's expensive perfume and the crisp, metallic tang of chilled champagne. 500 of the city's elite were gathered under crystal chandeliers that dripped light like frozen rain. They were there to celebrate the merger of Vanguard Horizon and Redwood Holdings, a deal that promised to reshape the financial landscape of the Pacific Northwest. I stood at the back of the room, hidden in the shadows of a velvet drape. I was wearing the navy wool suit Robert had bought me. It was tailored sharp and expensive. It fit my new skeletal frame like armor. My hair was short, my face clean-shaven. To the casual observer, I was just another elderly investor, perhaps, a retired partner, or a silent stakeholder. But if you looked closer, you would see the gaunt hollows of my cheeks, the unnatural pallor of my skin, and the eyes that were scanning the room, not for friends, but for targets. Robert stood beside me, his hand resting casually near his waist, near the gun. He nodded toward the stage. There he is, he whispered. Lucas stood at the podium. He looked magnificent. He was wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than my first house. His hair was perfectly styled, his smile was dazzling, and he radiated the easy, unearned confidence of a man who believes he has gotten away with murder. Behind him, a massive LED screen displayed the logos of the two companies merging into a golden sun. He was speaking. His voice, amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system, washed over the crowd like warm honey. Integrity, Lucas said, leaning into the microphone. It is a word we throw around often in this industry. But for me, it is personal. It is a legacy handed down to me by my father, the late Michael Jones. A murmur of respectful silence rippled through the room. Handkerchiefs were dabbed at eyes. My father was a builder, Lucas continued, his voice catching with practiced emotion. He built structures that could withstand earthquakes. But more importantly, he built a reputation that could withstand anything. When he passed away 2 years ago in Switzerland after a long battle with dementia, his last words to me were, "Lucas builds something that matters." I felt a cold, hard knot tighten in my stomach. The audacity was breathtaking. He was using my ghost to sell his fraud. He was standing on my grave to reach the top shelf. This merger, Lucas said, gesturing to the screen, is that something. It is the culmination of his dream. And I know somewhere up there he is looking down on us tonight smiling. I stepped out of the shadows. I am not looking down, Lucas, I whispered to myself. I am looking right at you. I began to move. I did not walk toward the stage. That is what a desperate man would do. A desperate man would run down the aisle, screaming accusations, getting tackled by security before he reached the microphone. I was not desperate. I was an engineer. I knew that in a room like this, power does not reside at the podium. It resides in the control booth. I moved along the perimeter wall, walking with a slow, deliberate gait. I passed waiters carrying trays of caviar. I passed tables of laughing bankers. No one stopped me. In a room full of old money, an old man in a suit is invisible. I was just background noise. I reached the technical station at the side of the stage. It was a bank of monitors and mixing boards manned by 2 young technicians wearing headsets. They were bored, scrolling on their phones, while Lucas droned on about synergy and growth. I walked right up to them. I projected an air of absolute authority. "Excuse me, gentlemen," I said. My voice was low, firm. "I am the senior compliance officer for the merger. We have a last-minute media insert for the presentation. The CEO requested it personally." The technician on the left looked up confused. We didn't get a change order for the run of show." "It is a surprise tribute," I said, pulling a USB drive from my pocket. It was a simple black stick, innocuous. "A video message from the founding partners. He wants it played now during the emotional beat." The technician hesitated. "I really should check with the stage manager." I leaned in. I put my hand on his shoulder. My grip was iron. "Son, do you want to be the reason Lucas Jones fires everyone in this booth? Just play the clip. It is 2 minutes long. You will be a hero." He looked at me. He saw the expensive suit. He saw the gray hair. He saw the confidence. He shrugged. "Okay, whatever." He took the USB drive. He plugged it into the main media server. "File name," he asked. "Truth.mp4, I said. He clicked it. He dragged it to the program window. On stage, Lucas was wiping a tear from his eye. "And so, in honor of my father, I would like to propose a toast." The technician hit play. The massive LED screen behind Lucas flickered. The Golden Sun logo vanished. The room went dark for a split second, drawing every eye to the stage. Then the image appeared. It was grainy, low light. The angle was strange, looking up from a table, capturing a face illuminated by the glow of a laptop screen. It was Lucas. But it was not the Lucas on stage. This Lucas was wearing a silk dressing gown. He was holding a bottle of wine. He was sitting on the floor of a concrete room. The audio crackled through the ballroom's massive speakers. "I am a genius, Dad," the Lucas on screen slurred. "I did what you never could. I beat the system." A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. People lowered their glasses. Lucas froze on stage, turning slowly to look at the screen. The video cut to a different angle. This one was sharper. It was recorded from a webcam. Lucas was pacing in the basement, talking on his phone. "Yeah, the Russian money is clean," the on-screen Lucas said. His voice was crystal clear. I routed it through the shell in Cyprus. Redwood Holdings. Nobody knows. The old man, please. He is a vegetable. I have him locked in the panic room. He will sign whatever I put in front of him. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. 500 people stopped breathing. The only sound was the voice of the man on the screen, confessing his sins to the world. Lucas on stage dropped his champagne glass. It shattered on the floor, the sound exploding like a gunshot. "Shut it off," he screamed. "Shut it off. It is a deepfake. It is I." But the video continued. It showed Lucas laughing. "I sold his house. I burned his photos. He doesn't exist anymore. He is just a ghost in the basement." Then the video cut to black. Text appeared on the screen, white and stark against the darkness. Bank of Georgetown. Account 77392041. Owner Lucas Jones. Balance $1.2 billion stolen. The crowd gasped. A collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the room. I stepped away from the tech booth. I walked out onto the floor, moving into the main aisle. The spotlight that had been focused on Lucas drifted, as if the operator was confused, searching for the source of the chaos. The beam of light swung across the room and hit me. I stopped. I stood in the center of the aisle, 20 feet from the stage. The light was blinding, but I didn't blink. I looked up at the podium. Lucas was staring at the screen, his face a mask of horror. He turned back to the crowd, his hands shaking. This is a hack," he stammered. "This is a malicious attack by our competitor's security. Cut the feed." Then he saw me. He stopped speaking mid-sentence. His eyes bulged. His jaw dropped. He looked like he was seeing a demon rising from hell. The room followed his gaze. 500 heads turned. I stood there tall and gaunt in my navy suit. I raised my hand. I pointed a single finger at him. "Hello, son," I said. My voice was not amplified. I didn't have a microphone. But in the dead silence of that room, my voice carried to the back row. "You forgot one thing," I said, walking slowly toward the stage. "When you bury a structural engineer, you better make sure the foundation is sound." Lucas stumbled back, knocking over the podium. The microphone screeched with feedback. "You're dead," he whispered, the microphone picking up his terrified murmur. "You're dead. I locked you in." "Steel rusts, Lucas," I said, taking another step. "And ghosts. They walk through walls." Panic erupted. It started as a murmur, then a roar. People were standing up, knocking over chairs. Phones were out recording. The Russian investors at the front table, 3 men in dark suits, stood up simultaneously. They didn't look at me. They looked at Lucas. Their expressions were not shocked. They were lethal. Lucas saw them. He saw the Russians. He saw the crowd turning on him. He saw his life disintegrating in real time. "Security!" he screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched wail. "Arrest him! He is a trespasser! He is crazy!" 2 large security guards moved toward me. Robert stepped out from the shadows. He didn't draw his gun. He simply held up his badge, his retired FBI badge, but in the chaos, it looked real enough. "Federal agent," Robert shouted. "Nobody touches him. This is an active crime scene." The guards froze. I didn't stop. I walked up the stairs to the stage. Lucas backed away until he hit the screen behind him. He was trapped between his digital confession and his physical nightmare. I reached the center of the stage. I stood next to the fallen podium. I looked out at the sea of faces, the bankers, the politicians, the socialites, who had toasted to my memory 5 minutes ago. "My name is Michael Jones," I said, my voice projecting with the power of a man who has nothing left to lose. "I am not dead. I was not in Switzerland. For 730 days I was in a concrete box under my own house. And the man standing before you," I pointed at Lucas without looking at him, "put me there." A woman in the front row screamed. Flashbulbs erupted like a thunderstorm. Lucas looked for an exit. He looked stage left. He looked stage right. Then he looked at the Russians. The lead Russian, A man with a scar running down his cheek drew a finger across his throat. It was a subtle gesture unseen by the cameras, but Lucas saw it. He knew what it meant. The deal was dead. The money was gone. And he was a liability. Lucas's face crumbled. The arrogance, the charm, the veneer of the successful CEO, it all sloughed off like dead skin. Underneath was just a scared, greedy child. He lunged at me. It was a desperate, flailing attack. He screamed a primal sound of rage and terror, and threw himself at me, his hands reaching for my throat. "You ruined it!" he shrieked. "You ruined everything." I didn't flinch. I had spent 2 years fighting gravity. I had spent 2 years fighting steel. I had spent 2 years fighting my own mind. A soft, pampered boy in a tuxedo was nothing. I sidestepped. It was a simple movement, minimal effort. I pivoted on my left foot, letting his momentum carry him past me. As he flew by, I extended my leg. I hooked his ankle with my foot. Thump. Lucas crashed face first onto the stage. He slid across the polished floor, stopping at the edge of the platform, his legs dangling over the orchestra pit. He scrambled to get up, blood streaming from his nose. "It's mine," he sobbed, pounding the floor. "The money is mine. I earned it. I waited for you to die. Why wouldn't you just die?" The room gasped again. The confession was live. Sirens wailed in the distance, approaching fast. I walked over to him. I stood over him, looking down. He looked up at me, blood and tears mixing on his face. "Dad," he whimpered. "Dad, please, help me. They'll kill me. The Russians. They'll kill me." I looked at him. I looked for a spark of the boy I used to carry on my shoulders. I looked for the son I had loved, but I didn't see him. I saw a stranger. I saw a structural failure that could not be repaired. I leaned down. I spoke softly, so only he could hear. "I can't help you, Lucas. I'm just a ghost. Remember." I straightened up and turned my back on him. The doors to the ballroom burst open. "Police, everybody down." A tactical team swarmed the room. FBI agents and windbreakers poured in behind them. Robert had called in every favor he had. They rushed the stage. "Lucas Jones," an agent shouted. "You are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and kidnapping." They grabbed him. They hauled him to his feet. They slapped cuffs on his wrists. Lucas was screaming, thrashing, begging. "He's crazy. My father is crazy. Check his medical records, he's senile." As they dragged him away, he looked back at me one last time. His eyes were wide, pleading, terrified. I stood still. I didn't look away. I watched him go. The Russians in the front row stood up quietly and slipped out the side exit. The police let them go. They were focused on the main target. I knew the Russians wouldn't go far. They would be waiting. Prison was going to be a very dangerous place for Lucas. Robert walked up onto the stage. He stood beside me. "It's over, Mike," he said quietly. I looked at the empty spot where Lucas had fallen. I looked at the crowd who were staring at me in awe and horror. "No," I said, adjusting my cuffs. "The demolition is over. Now comes the cleanup." I walked to the edge of the stage and sat down, my legs dangling over the edge, just an old man tired from a long, long day. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of champagne and justice. It wasn't sweet. It tasted like rust. But for the first time in 2 years, I could breathe. The ballroom was suspended in a moment of absolute, suffocating silence. It was as if the air itself had been sucked out by the revelation on the screen. The only sound was the high-pitched feedback whine from the dropped microphone piercing the room like a dentist's drill. Lucas stood center stage, frozen. His face, usually a mask of polished charm, was now a ruin of terror. His eyes darted frantically, searching for an exit, searching for an ally, searching for anything other than the reality that was closing in on him. I stood at the foot of the stairs leading up to the stage. I held a wireless microphone I had taken from the stunned technician. I did not shout. I did not scream. I spoke with the calm, measured tone of an engineer explaining a catastrophic structural failure. "Hello, son," I said. My voice echoed through the massive speakers, crisp and cold. "I heard you missed me." The sound of my voice seemed to snap Lucas out of his paralysis. He jerked back as if physically struck. He pointed a trembling finger at me, his face twisting into a rictus of panic. "Security!" he shrieked, his voice cracking. "Get him! That is an imposter. That is a paid actor. My father is in Switzerland. Arrest him." Two uniformed private security guards near the stage hesitated. They looked at Lucas, then at the video still playing on the screen behind him, the video of Lucas confessing to locking me in a dungeon. They looked at me, the living proof of that crime. They didn't move. "Don't bother," a deep voice boomed from the back of the room. The double doors at the main entrance swung open with a heavy thud. Robert stepped in, flanked by a phalanx of men and women in windbreakers emblazoned with 3 yellow letters, FBI. "Nobody leaves," Robert announced, flashing his badge high. "Federal agents, seal the exits." The sound of heavy bolts sliding home on the ballroom doors echoed like prison bars slamming shut. The trap was sprung. Lucas looked at the agents, then back at me. He was cornered. The animal instinct took over the fight or flight response of a rat that knows the exterminator has arrived. "You," Lucas hissed, staring down at me. "You did this. You ruined everything." I walked up the stairs. 1 step, 2 steps. I moved slowly, leaning slightly on a black cane Robert had given me, not because I needed it to walk, but because it gave me a weapon if I needed one. "I didn't ruin anything, Lucas," I said, reaching the platform. I turned to the audience. The investors, the press, the city elite were all staring their mouths agape. "I am simply conducting a post-mortem inspection." I turned back to Lucas. I raised the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my eyes never leaving my son's face. "The man before you claims to be a visionary. He claims to have built an empire. But let me tell you about the foundation. It is not built on concrete. It is built on the bones of his own father." "Shut up," Lucas screamed, backing away until he hit the screen. "He told you I was sick," I continued, relentless. "He told you I was confused. But for 730 days while he spent your money on cars and parties, I was sitting in a 40-square-meter box beneath his house. I was drinking water from a bathroom tap. I was eating paste. And I was listening." I pulled the stack of cardboard scraps from my inner jacket pocket. I held them up. "I listened to every phone call," I said. "I memorized every number. Account 7739-2041 at the Bank of Georgetown, the Shell Company in Cyprus. The bribes paid to the zoning commissioner last August. It is all here. Every stolen dollar. Every lie." The flashbulbs were blinding now, a strobe light of judgment. The reporters were shouting questions. The Russian investors near the front were gone, vanished into the night the moment the FBI appeared. Lucas looked at the cardboard in my hand. He looked at the agents swarming up the side stairs. He realized there was no legal way out. The rage broke him. "Give me that!" he roared. He lunged. It was a clumsy, desperate attack. He threw himself at me, hands clawing for the evidence, teeth bared like a wild dog. He wanted to tear me apart. He wanted to silence the ghost that had come back to haunt him. I did not move. I did not flinch. I had spent 2 years fighting a steel door. I had spent 2 years keeping my body hard while my world rotted. I watched his approach, analyzing his momentum, his center of gravity. It was poor form. He was off balance, driven by emotion, not logic. As he reached for me, I simply shifted my weight. I sidestepped to the left, a fluid motion I had practiced 1,000 times in the dark. I brought the cane up. I didn't strike him. I simply hooked the crook of the cane around his right ankle as he rushed past. I pulled. Lucas's feet flew out from under him. Gravity took over. He slammed face first into the hardwood floor of the stage with a sickening crunch. He skidded, coming to a stop right at my feet. He tried to push himself up, spitting blood, but the fight was gone. He looked up at me, gasping for air. His tuxedo torn, his nose broken. He looked small. He looked pathetic. "Why," he sobbed, tears cutting tracks through the blood on his face. "I gave you everything. I kept you alive. I could have killed you." "You did kill me," I said softly. "The father who loved you died in that basement. The man standing here is just the consequence of your actions." The FBI agents were on him in seconds. They hauled him up, wrenching his arms behind his back. The click of the handcuffs was loud and final. "Lucas Jones," an agent recited, "you are under arrest for kidnapping, wire fraud, money laundering, and attempted murder." Lucas began to scream. "It wasn't me. It was the stress. The market made me do it. I had no choice. Dad, tell them I'm sick. Tell them I need help." He looked at me with wild, pleading eyes. He was playing the victim card, the last card in his deck. He wanted me to save him. He wanted the father who used to bandage his scraped knees to step in and fix this. I leaned in close. I signaled the agents to pause for a second. I brought my face inches from his ear. "You want to know why I escaped?" I whispered. Lucas stopped screaming. He looked at me, trembling. "Because you used zinc screws on the vent," I said. "You cut corners. You used cheap materials. That is your legacy, Lucas. You are cheap." I paused, letting the words sink in. "I built that panic room to protect you from the world," I whispered, my voice hard as granite. "But now, you are going to a federal supermax. And let me tell you something about federal prisons, son. They don't use cheap screws. You are never getting out." I pulled back. I nodded to the agents. "Take him." They dragged him away. He didn't scream anymore. He just hung his head, sobbing brokenly, as he was marched past the investors he had swindled, past the cameras he had courted, and out into the night. I stood alone on the stage. Robert walked up and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay, Mike?" I looked at the empty doorway where my son had vanished. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. The anger was gone. The hate was gone. All that was left was a quiet, hollow peace. "I am fine, Bob," I said. "I am finally out." 3 months later, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment. It was small, just a one-bedroom on the 5th floor, but it had a view of the city skyline. I didn't need a mansion. I didn't need a wine cellar or a library. I needed the sky. I sipped my coffee, watching the sunrise paint the buildings in shades of orange and gold. The villa was gone. I had sold the land to a conservation trust. They were going to bulldoze the house and let the forest reclaim the hill. The basement would be filled with dirt, buried forever. I didn't keep the money. I took the proceeds from the sale along with the restitution the court had seized from Lucas's frozen accounts, and I started a foundation, the Sentinel Project. We provided legal aid and secure housing for elderly victims of financial abuse and domestic violence. I spent my days reviewing blueprints for safe houses, ensuring the locks were secure, ensuring the walls were sound. Lucas was awaiting trial. The DA was asking for life without parole. The Russians had put a price on his head, so he was in protective custody, locked in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day. He was back in a box. The irony was not lost on me. I put down my coffee cup and picked up a pen. I was writing a letter to him. I didn't know if I would send it, but I needed to write it. I wrote about forgiveness, not for him, but for myself. I forgave myself for being blind. I forgave myself for loving him too much to see the monster he was becoming. I looked out at the city, breathing in the cool morning air. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I had Robert. I had my work. And most importantly, I had my freedom. People often ask me how I survived, how I kept my sanity in the dark. They want to know the engineering trick, the chemical formula. But the real secret wasn't chemistry. It wasn't physics. It was a simple, brutal truth that I had to learn the hard way. Many people think that loving your children means sacrificing everything, even your own life. I used to think that way. I thought being a father meant giving pieces of yourself until there was nothing left. But I was wrong. Self-preservation is not selfishness. It is responsibility. You have to keep a part of yourself safe. You have to keep a back door open. You have to keep a spare key, a separate bank account, and most importantly, a clear mind. Because when you hand the keys to your entire existence over to someone else, even if that person is your own flesh and blood, you are no longer a parent. You are a hostage. Don't ever let love blind you to the cold, hard reality of human nature. Love with a warm heart, yes, give freely, but keep a cool head. Inspect the foundation. Check the bolts. That is the only way to ensure that you and the people you love are truly safe. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to tell, but the truth is, the only thing that sets us free. This is Michael Jones signing off. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Drop your country or city in the comments below, so we can see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed this tale of justice and survival, please make sure to subscribe to the Bittersweet Revenge channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear it. Stay safe and always check your locks.